Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Transformative Community Engagement. My name is Karen Castro, and I am the Programs and Membership Associate here at Chorus America. We're so glad you could join us today, either live or on replay. I'll be your host for today, and I'll be joined by my colleague, Casey Cook, who will help manage our questions and chat throughout the session. If you're joining us on Zoom for this live session, please feel free to use the question function, and we'll try to get to it during today's session. If you're watching this session on replay, we encourage you to post your questions or comments below in the comment box. Our speakers will stop back occasionally and answer questions as they are posted. Everything Chorus America does, including this conference, is made possible through the generous support of choral music lovers like you. It's not too late to contribute to our 2020 conference campaign by texting chorus to 56512. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. Jan Ramseyer Miller is the Artistic Director of One Voice Mixed LGBTA Chorus and serves as the Artistic Director for Gala Choruses, an association of just under 200 LGBTQ choruses. Ahmed Anzaldua is the Director and Founder of Border Crossing, one of this year's Chorus America ASCAP winners of the Adventurous Programming, and a co-editor of the Justice Choir Songbook. Please join me in welcoming Jane and Ahmed.
Hi there. We are delighted to be with you this afternoon after an incredible week of really wonderful workshops. One of the things I've enjoyed is how these workshop topics have really intertwined and intermingled. So Ahmed and I are really excited to be here and share with you some of what we have learned over the years. I will say that my learning has been, I'm presenting with humility after making lots of mistakes in my life in doing this kind of work. And I feel like I keep learning and working at these issues as I go. But to set the framework for this conversation, there are many of our choruses are programming concerts that are trying to become more diverse or maybe more relevant. Particularly in the past month, we're looking at current social issues addressing Black Lives Matter. A year or two ago, women's rights, the Me Too movement, addressing truth-telling around the history of Indigenous people. So the questions that I'm asking today is, what does it actually mean to incorporate social justice themes? Are we actually connecting to the communities where we live or the communities from which our music originated? One of the workshops I really enjoyed earlier, I think it was Tuesday, was Nina Simon's workshop, pushing people to really choose if they were ready to reach beyond and broaden their usual audiences into other communities. So I've spent my whole life as an activist and as a musician, done dozens of community collaborations, and the older I get, the more I realize that there are some important questions we need to ask. So this is my confessions of a 20-something white activist. I am no longer 20-something. I'm pushing 60, but back in my 20s, I was working for Habitat for Humanity in North Minneapolis, which is a predominantly African-American neighborhood. And it was my job to go into the neighborhood and build a board of directors made of neighborhood people. And one afternoon, I found myself having coffee with an African-American elder, a pastor in that community, talking with him about what Habitat was doing and trying to get him to join the Habitat board. And he looked at me after maybe a half hour over coffee and he said, "Why do you white people always try to get us to join what you're doing? Why don't you become a part of what we're doing in the community?" And that one comment blew my mind and also began to completely reshape the way that I thought about the world and thought about my work in the world. So some questions to ask is, are we creating social change if nothing actually changes within our own singers, within our own choruses? As we take on social issues, is our programming balanced with internal education and openness to transformation? Are we open to considering that our chorus may turn out to be something completely different than what we thought it was? rather than asking how can we become more diverse, which I know is a very, very common question, perhaps the question instead is to ask where can we get involved in our community. So Ahmed's going to take us through a description of the work that he has done in this world. Ahmed and I share offices in a Unity Unitarian Church, and I am so impressed by the work that he is doing with both the Justice Choir and Border Crossing. So take it away, Ahmed.
Thank you, Jane. And hi, good afternoon to everyone. So I've done some version of this talk before where I talk a little about the different strategies that Border Crossing uses to plan all our events, all our concerts, all our community sings. But the last 3 weeks here in the Twin Cities the city kind of exploded. And the almost everything that happened in neighborhoods where Border Crossing works or involved organizations that are Border Crossing partners. And something happened that's caused me to also kind of reevaluate a lot of what I do and to start thinking a bit more deeply about what it really means to engage in the work of social justice. So to give you some context, on the Tuesday when the protest started in the Twin Cities, we started getting calls from community partners just thinking like, hey, can you spare a few people to come sweep up some broken glass or help us pick up the offices so we started doing that sort of thing. And then on the Thursday, all of a sudden it was like, hey, we need to evacuate this apartment building. There's 40 families there. We need to get them out of here because there's fires. It's all hands on deck. We know that you guys have like a network of people that provide homestays for singers or book hotels, help us out. So then we started doing that. And then on the Friday, it was, hey, the power went out in this whole neighborhood. We need freezers. Do you have freezers? So we had freezers. And then that Saturday, it was a call from one church that was one of our venues that said, we have food shelf. It's depleted. Can you put out a call to your donors? So we did. So over those 2 weeks, this was completely unplanned. Border Crossing all of a sudden became like we found ourselves being asked for help or being asked as part of this community. And that really got me thinking, what is it about this relationship that maybe has put us in this position? Because we are not the only choir in the Twin Cities that has projects in these neighborhoods or that has done collaborations. But at the same time, from my perspective, it seems like we are the only one that right now is doing this sort of work. So that got me thinking about the sorts of relationships that we have. So Border Crossing, we, as was mentioned, we do concerts, we do a lot of adventurous programming. A lot of it is focused on Latinx repertoire, art, culture in Latinx spaces. But our mission really is to integrate a field that we see as historically segregated. And most of our work has been focused in 3 specific neighborhoods in the Twin Cities. And apart from concerts, we do community singing events. And we do a lot of these very frequently. We do them every alternating with each concert during the season, so maybe 5 or 6 per season at least. And they vary. Some of them are very formal, some of them are informal, some of them are us bringing music to something that's already going on. So here are some examples of what a community sing might look like for us. In 2017, there was a festival for Dia de Muertos happening in one of the Latinx communities. That festival had been going on for many years, and they were looking for music for the inauguration. So you can notice that people are holding song sheets. We did a workshop. We taught people songs from northern Mexico that would fit the moment, and then we sung them as part of a pretty solemn occasion during Dia de los Muertos. Or our community sings might be a little bit more politically minded. So, for example, the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Committee. It's an organization that works for the rights of immigrant workers, especially Latinx immigrants. So there was a workers' march happening on International Workers' Day in 2018, and we wanted to be involved because we want to be part of this cause in the community. So we gathered in a parking lot, we taught people protest songs in Spanish and English, and then we marched with the march. We were in there and people were singing. Or our community sings might be fun and informal. So, for example, this is a brewery in North Minneapolis where we just got together and had a lot of beer, and people sang. So this is more of a party atmosphere. You might. So we were celebrating that we had a group of singers from Venezuela visiting us from La Scuola Cantorum, and it was just a big party. Our most recent community sing happened around Mother's Day. We had to shift it online because of coronavirus, but it was essentially it was thought for people that had their mothers on the other side of the border or far away. So we got together a mariachi band and did online serenades so that people could sing Las Mañanitas to their mom on Mother's Day. And we've had, I think so far over our 3 years, we've had about 20 of these community sings. And the thing about them is that they've really served to transform our organization. So I see the question asked, how do we do the work of social justice? How does our organization become more relevant, more diverse? And I found that what really helps is to think of relationship, not of what can I do, but what sort of relationship do I have. So the work of justice, the word justice itself is a description of the relationship and the power dynamics in that relationship. If there's no relationship, it's not justice, it's charity. Justice implies that you are partners and that you're working to create a partnership that's fair, that's equitable. And when I founded Border Crossing, we had a board that had 4 people on it, all white, and a donor base that was primarily white. And over time, as these community things happen, as we do concerts and partnerships, these partnerships become board seats. Right now we have 9 people on our board, 5 whom are Latinx and 2 more who are white but have Latinx spouses. All of these people live in the neighborhoods where we work, have relationships that are related to these causes. So going back to what happened in Minneapolis 3 weeks ago and what might have been different between our group and maybe other groups is that it was my board, the people who oversee my work, who were making these calls, who were saying, hey, my neighbors need to be evacuated. Hey, the power went out over here. Hey, this food shelf at my church needs Spanish-speaking volunteers. Help us out. So as we think of community engagement, we need to think of it as a relationship that doesn't end when the concert's done. It is an ongoing back and forth, and you are working together, and that means that you take up their causes, and they in turn are going to buy into your cause. So as we plan all of our events, but especially our community singing events, we look at them through 3 aspects, which I'm going to walk you through. There's relevance, which basically is this thing that we're doing, what does it bring that's new to the table? What does it bring that's necessary? How does it address something that this community that I'm working with wants to engage in? So relevance is basically the what question. And a lot of the time, this question doesn't come from you, from your organization. It comes from your partners. So for example, the three events that I pointed out at the beginning, which might have been arguably our three most successful community sings in the last 3 years, none of them were thought up by me, the artistic director. All three were suggestions from people in the community that said, you know, we've had this before, singing would add so much to it. Or wouldn't it be fun if we did this together? Once we have the what for an event, we start thinking about the how, the access piece. What are the barriers? How do people participate in this and take away from it as much as you want them to take away from it? And once you figure out the how, you think about the who, or the for whom. Representation. Who's doing it? With whom are you doing it with? Who are your partners? Who are the primary people participating? So this all seems kind of theoretical. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what we do specifically when we plan concerts or community events in the Latinx communities that we work in here in the Twin Cities. So first, it's that piece of relevance. How do we make a community sing relevant to the Latinx community in South Minneapolis or North Minneapolis or in West St. Paul? These are the things we consider. When we put together an event, we think about what is the overall story that this event tells. Not just the individual little stories, but the overall story and how that might resonate with that experience. We think about which communities are being connected through that event. Is it your singers and another organization? Is it two communities in that neighborhood that are coming together? Is it you as an individual and the singers in your group? Who is coming together? And we try to be intentional about making that connection. Now, this one's important. For something to be relevant, it can't just be familiar. Familiarity is good, but it ties more into access than it ties into relevance. Because if your event brings something new, it creates that little spark that makes people want to be more engaged, to want to do more. So maybe it is a song that you might think, oh, people might not be as aware of this one, or a version of that song. Or maybe there's an issue or a piece of history that people aren't aware of. And to make it relevant, you've got to have a call to action. It can be something little. It can be, hey, you attended our community sing, come to our concert that's happening next week. You attended our community sing that's being organized in support of immigrant rights, workers' rights. Please go support this organization that does this work. Volunteer for them. Thank you for attending our fun party at La Doña Cerveceria, and you had lots of beer. Now, frequent this establishment, visit them, buy their stuff, bring your families next time there's something going on. So this is relevance. How do we make it accessible? And all of these things, we're thinking specifically about our community, but this is something that I think anyone can apply, just thinking through intentionally what they're doing. So we start with the things that most people think about accessibility. How much does it cost? Where does it happen? What time, right? So it's convenient. You can get to it, and it's not happening during the workday, or it's happening on a weekend if you want families there, or so it's convenient. People can pay for it. It's free of charge, or it's pay as you will. The people they want participating, you want to be able to make sure that they can either pay for it or that that barrier of payment is covered. Now this one, now we start getting into the items that maybe people don't realize are as much barriers to accessibility as the other things. Making it cheap and making it convenient are good, but this one's important. It has to be easy to follow. When we are immersed in this choral art for so long, we take a lot of things for granted. And we don't think about what something might be for someone that's not a newcomer to this. So if your community is bilingual, as the Latinx community is, I typically do program notes in Spanish and English. If there are lyrics that you can write down, you can write them down. Or if there's opportunity for other visual aids, you want those there. And you also want to have some sort of opportunity in place for people to be able to bring their questions or their commentary. And that can be as simple as a survey or as easy as encouraging singers and board members to be among the audience afterward. Anything that helps make the event easy to follow. Now, this is where familiarity comes in. So something that makes something accessible is if there's something that people can latch onto that they will recognize, that they will see, okay, I see myself in this, or I know this, and this can be an entry point into something else that's going on. And something that we think about when we talk about community singing events in the Latinx community, we try to make them informal, loose. And that's something that I've also seen that primarily white organizations don't take into account. There are so many things about the way we do things that are very much steeped in white culture. And I'm not saying that us Latinos are not punctual. That's not the case at all. But I might say that we are ingrained to think about certain structures from little things about how people dress, how they walk into a stage, how long they stay after a particular time ends for a concert versus how open they might be to children walking in the aisles or not. All of these things lend to a general atmosphere, and that is sometimes a huge barrier for accessibility. This idea that I didn't go to that concert because it just felt stuffy. It just didn't feel me. It just didn't feel like I wanted to be there. Or, it's Friday night, there's this other thing I'd much rather be doing than trying this thing out that I don't even know is going to work out. So we did accessibility, we did relevance. Now, representation, for us, so Border Crossing started as a primarily white ensemble that over our 3 years of history has gotten more diverse and has included more Latinx voices, both on our board and on stage. But from the very beginning, every concert has been a collaboration with a Latinx artist or Latinx organization. And that collaboration happens off stage as well. So from the beginning, we have been performing every concert on our season. One of the concerts is at a church in West St. Paul that is almost over 90% Latinx congregation. And they let us perform there for free. But at the same time, sometimes they need a musician for a Sunday because their music director wasn't there. Sometimes they want us to put out something on our social media that we can share for them. So this collaboration becomes a long-term partnership. Every program we do is researched in depth. We pay people that know what they're doing to take a look at it and go, okay, this isn't misrepresenting the music or the culture that you're trying to address here. We go out of our way to recruit Latinx performers. And that's in our audition material, and that's also in our everyday interactions between artistic director and singers and board and staff. And a big one, to make sure that representation is there, we put things in context. A lot of the time, there is an impulse to erase or to say, no, we can't do this. Or there's always the question of, well, what's going to happen with the canon? And for me, it always comes down to presenting everything not as a series of masterworks or as things that we do because they're going to make us better somehow, but as a part of a much larger reality. So if you can bring as much of society, of religion, of history, of culture into the thing you're doing, it's better. And I think that as arts organizations, a lot of the time we try to make ourselves not have an opinion. So maybe I might be I believe that Black Lives Matter, and I will say it over and over again, Black Lives Matter. But when it comes time to have your organization say that, all of a sudden there's a little bit of pause. There's a little bit of let's sit down and talk through this and create the right statement. And I think that that it is important that if we want communities to engage with our organizations, with our arts organizations, then these arts organizations have to be willing to engage with these political, social, spiritual, cultural issues that the community cares about. All right, Jane, I'm going to pass it over to you now.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to add, Ahmed, I've been to many of your concerts, and so one of my favorites is every holiday season, Ahmed, well, at least for several holiday seasons, Ahmed has done a bilingual Messiah in English and Spanish. And I just remember the last one I was at in December. Literally, what you were saying is so true. There was a family eating snacks and eating dinner in some of the pews, and kids are running back and forth, and it just felt like a completely different atmosphere from anywhere else in the Twin Cities that you could go to hear Messiah. And I loved. I mean, I just loved what that felt like in that setting.
That atmosphere matters so much, and we don't think about it. I remember the first time that happened. I mean, this was the third time that we did Messiah. We've done Messiah 3 times now. We do it in Spanish, English. We alternated with a Latin American piece that is also connected to Messiah in some way. So sometimes we do it in Latin American Baroque or the Latin American cantata for Christmas. And I remember, yeah, that was like our second year. There's this whole family. They were eating like a big bag of cheese puffs while they were watching. And one of my singers was like, what's going on? And we didn't even know like how to address it. But then, you think back and you think, well, the fact that that there's this comfort that this feels like a safe place where you can do that, that's what we want as a choral organization.
Well, it actually reminded me, I was really, really fortunate in 14 maybe, to attend the World Choral Symposium in Argentina. And the performances were in this gymnasium, and it was exactly like that. Like one evening I sat beside this family who was eating dinner while they were listening to the Choral Symposium, and they shared their mate drink with me, and kids running everywhere. And so when I was a part of your Messiah performance, I thought, oh yeah, this is familiar, even for me, just from that limited exposure. So that was cool. All right. So I conduct one voice mixed chorus. One voice is a 125 voice LGBTQ and allies chorus. We are predominantly a white chorus, but we particularly try to find ways to connect in our community and to do music that is not just representative of white composers. So this guy named Doug Borwick has a really interesting framework for how he talks about audience development. And this is what it looks like. Get a grant, create a project, find some poor people, tell them why they should get involved, and then be surprised when they don't show up. It looks actually something like this. Hi, we're doing a concert about racism. Seems like that's an issue that's really important to you, and we want to support what you're doing. We'd love you to come to the concert. Here, 100 free tickets. See you there. And then could someone from your organization speak right before we ask for donations? Okay, it maybe sounds funny, but I have been to concerts that are just like that, where this was just the extent of the collaboration with the community. So after reading Doug's scenario, and you can check out many of the writings that he has done, but I played with this idea of transformative engagement. So this is a kind of engagement where the chorus and the collaborative partner and the community audience all benefit in the ways that the performance happens, in the ways that the plan is made, and the ways that all these groups are working together. And it looks really different. So this looks more like, and you can see my screen now, right? Okay. Thanks for meeting. Tell me about your organization. So the very first sentence is asking for information about your community partner. And then here's what we're doing and how it might connect with what I just heard you sharing. What would you like us to know about your community? And who are the people that can best teach and guide us in understanding your community? Ahmed talked about this too, but if you don't have those people within your chorus or on your board, it's really important in a collaboration to find who those community experts are and listen to them and learn from them and compensate them as well. Asking, do you have an event coming up where I could visit, or is there some way that I could volunteer to support your organization? We haven't even gotten to a concert yet. And then what do you recommend as next steps? So just a different kind of way of thinking about how you might approach a community partnership, especially if you are a more white-led organization. So I'm going to give you a little bit of description. In 2016, after those famous elections, Minnesota, there was a lot of racial discrimination and disparity about the immigrants who live in Minnesota, and there are many, many immigrants in this particular state. So I decided basically 24 hours after the election that I was going to program a concert called Sanctuary that explored immigrants and their music, immigrants to Minnesota. So the first thing I did was educated myself. I went to a number of workshops about refugee and immigrant experience in Minnesota. I collected stories. I collected statistics. I shared those with our singers. I brought in speakers. I also asked each singer in my chorus to attend at least one music or cultural event in Minneapolis where they were the minority, because I wanted everybody to sort of experience what that felt like. They had no agenda. They were not teaching. They were not trying to connect with anybody in particular. Their only agenda was to listen and learn and experience. Then we also had a potluck. And all the singers cooked food from their own ethnic background, which was really fun because it created a lot of really nice storytelling. So our community partner for this concert was a group called Green Card Voices. This is a nonprofit organization that collects stories of immigrants in Minnesota and shares them through printed books and video and web. It was a pretty young organization, so when I first met with them, they had just published 2 books. And they were really looking for ways to get more connected in the community and have more exposure. So one of the first things I did was meet with their community youth and ask what their goals were for the concert. Their particular goals were they wanted to have more audiences hear them, more people understand their experience as immigrants. They wanted to have their stories and their books displayed really big in our audience lobby. And they wanted free tickets. They wanted to be able to invite their friends and family to the concert. So indeed, in our concert lobby, they had these 12 huge, I think there were 6 or 8 foot panels that described each youth and their story. Youth also who had their stories represented in these 2 books came to the concert and signed them and were able to sell books at the concert. But we also integrated them into the actual concert program. So this is NEMA. And NEMA came in to us. We had a couple youth who identified as LGBT, and they were particularly part of telling their story both as immigrants and as coming out in their own community and in the Minnesota community. So Minnesota has a very large Somali population. So NEMA suggested that we learn the Somali national anthem. This is actually an anthem from 2012. And she came in and worked with us on the history of the song. She gave us a translation and then also shared her story of immigrating from Somalia and her experience of coming out after she came to Minnesota. So one of the most beautiful parts of this whole experience was I had worked with NEMA before she ever met the choir. and had her sing the national anthem, and I recorded it, and then our chorus learned it, and we actually learned 4-part harmony for the chorus. So the first time Nima came in, she rehearsed with us, and then I said, okay, we're going to sing something for you. And she stood in the front because she was talking and teaching about this national anthem, and we started to sing the chorus in 4-part harmony, and her mouth just dropped, and she buried her head in her hands. I think for this young Somali woman to hear a predominantly white chorus sing her national anthem was just an incredible experience. We also worked with Angel from El Salvador. We did a couple songs in Spanish. We have a large Mexican population here. And he also performed some spoken word and narrative in the concert. He told his immigration story. And he was the one that said he wanted to invite people to come. So we made sure that there were lots of free tickets for Green Card Voices to be a part of it. He also ended up, both of them, hanging out with us, and he particularly brought his boyfriend to the after party, so it was really fun to connect with him after the concert as well. So we are continuing to find ways to partnership with Green Card Voices after the concert. Our singers have volunteered for some of their projects, purchased books, offered donations to the work that they're doing. This October, with the election coming up, we are actually, in this COVID world, going to stream the Sanctuary concert. And so I'm in conversation with Green Card Voices about doing some interviews with youth and staff that will play in and out of the concert stream to sort of put it in context for where we are today. I'll just describe briefly. So this was a concert on immigration, which was a little daunting and a little scary because we learned, I think it was 10 different languages. And I was committed to making sure with every song that we learned that we connected with someone from that community and culture to teach language and also to teach about the particular song that we were singing. So we have also a large Hmong population. There are not many Hmong's choral songs in Minnesota or in the world. But we had worked in a school where a Hmong student wrote a piece of music and he came in and coached us as we worked on his composition. There are lots of people from Norway and Sweden here in Minnesota. So we also try to make a link between people who immigrated hundreds of years ago and people who are immigrating now. Sharon Day is an Ojibwe elder. It felt really important that we were also honoring the experience of Indigenous people here in the Twin Cities. So she came and did workshops with us and taught some of the music that we sang in this concert as well. A gay Muslim man, a composer in Toronto, visited us with Skype as we learned his songs. So in this virtual world, that's a really great option. If you don't have access to a large city, for example, to bring in these kind of composers and resources. And the other thing I added to the program was 12 action steps, because I wanted audiences not just to hear this music, but I said from the stage, we want you to take these action steps and go out in the world and find ways that you can support your immigrant neighbors. Out of this concert, another beautiful thing that happened was working more directly with Sharon Day, who is a water walker. This took me back to the habitat story that I told. Sharon has been doing water walks as part of an effort for water protection. And I realized, oh, this is something that I can do, a way that I can connect and get involved in the Indigenous community in a respectful way. So I've been working or participating alongside Sharon in that kind of work. So this has been a great way to sort of build that relationship, and we began working on a project that was supposed to happen this spring, and it was postponed because of COVID, so we're hoping it happens next year. But basically working with Sharon to explore Minnesota as a place of both homecoming and exile for LGBTQ people and for Indigenous people. As a part of this work and collaboration, I was then invited to come in as a vocal coach for Akitawan, which is an Indigenous youth theater group, and it turns out they're now going to be a part of our concert. We talked about ways to be accessible for the Indigenous community particularly for the concert, and Sharon suggested doing some parts of this concert at All Nations Church, which is a Native American church, and then providing free busing to the concert. So before the concert ever happens, making sure that we're eating together, having potlucks, and doing small performances jointly. Ahmed, do you want to do a little bit of the performance practice piece?
Sure. Well, this has been a bit of a soapbox for me. Performance practice, honestly, the answer to almost every issue with performance practice is to really seek out relationship. I keep going back to that word, with people from the community or culture from where that work comes out. And I think that the points that Jane puts here are really important. So I think that right now is a very good time for us choral directors, artistic directors, to just take some time to really examine what we've learned during our time in music school. To really examine things that we take for granted, which might be, where do we get our music? Where do we get our scores? Who are we buying them from? Who is writing them? Who is publishing them? And who might be left out from that process? And really re-examine everything we learned in school about how do you take a piece of music from concept to performance. Because a lot of that process that we learn where, okay, you have your score, you mark it up, you sing it, there's a type of vocal tone that we're looking for, here are these exercises that we do, we start building it little by little. That doesn't apply universally, but we tend to be taught the white European default for everything as if it were the only way. And we are missing out on so much, especially when we're talking about performance practice and preparation of music that is outside of the Western European classical tradition. And even then, to sit down and really examine, what does that concept of Western European classical music mean? Because as far as I know, so much of that music during that time period was also being produced by composers of color in Latin America, in places that are not Europe or Germany or France. So I think that right now is a good time to just re-examine all of this with a critical lens. And point number 5: be intentional about who is featured on stage. This is important. But I want to add to that the people that are featured on stage, there are ways of doing it. So the solution to structural problems in core organizations, the default cannot be, let's put more people of color on stage, when the donor base and the board are not made up of people of color. And I guarantee, so if the leadership is more diverse, then the performers will be more diverse as well as the community partners.
Great. These are just a few tips that I added. Listen more than you talk, which can be really hard to do sometimes as an artistic director, especially. You're used to being in control, which is the next one. Know that the outcome may take a completely different form than you were expecting, and that happens all the time in collaboration. Know that true collaboration will take so much time and so much advanced planning, often years probably if you're doing it well. And I'm going to describe a little planning grid that I put together in case it helps. You can't do this alone. I talked about identifying community guides or experts to help you begin to understand your partners. Ahmed talked about the board members and community people that are part of his organization in particular. And so important, especially for a predominantly white chorus, to train and educate our choruses before we ever invite guests into our space, so that first visit is respectful. We know what kind of food to serve. We know a little bit about approaching and connecting with that community. And I said this already, but get involved in the events that your collaborative partner is planning and make those the first priority. And lastly, if you feel uncomfortable, I think that's great. I mean, you can of course be insensitive, but I think feeling uncomfortable means you've taken yourself out of your usual zone, and it may be a really, really good thing in terms of moving your chorus forward. A couple pitfalls: lack of internal education, the danger of cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. I think that was Rollo Dilworth's term, or maybe many people have used it. Failing to ask why you're programming this music, as opposed to just putting music from various cultures or communities into your program. Again, taking the lead without slowing down and engaging the partners that you're working with. Assuming that people from non-white communities actually want to hear the music that you're performing. And this is the little grid that I put apart, and there's a, Karen will put a little link in the chat for how you can download this as part of the new Harmony training workbook. But it's a way to just, you can download this grid and to help you think about who your partner is, with who your experts may be, what your training might be, goal setting with those partners, and it goes on from there. So this is also the page on the Gala website that has right here a workbook that you can download and use for training within your chorus. It was specifically created for LGBT choruses, but it's being used by many other kinds of choruses as well. And the last section in the workbook is about community transformation. And I think we're ready for questions.
Everyone, please join me in a round of applause first for Jane and Ahmed. That was a fantastic presentation. We don't actually have any questions right now. I think everybody was just absorbing what you were both saying and listening raptly. So again, if you do have any questions for either Jane or Ahmed, please put them in the Q&A.
I'm going to ask Ahmed a question.
Yeah.
That's okay. Ahmed, you just hinted on it, but it's so genius. Can you talk about the work that you did? I think it was first with Messiah, where you took Handel's Messiah and then composers in South America who are writing at the same time. That was amazing.
You know, so as I mentioned before, our best ideas aren't ideas that I came up with. So when we started doing concerts in the west side of St. Paul, the church where we'd been performing, the church we picked, we chose it because it was founded by Mexican immigrants, and it's been primarily a Mexican immigrant church from its foundation, rather than being a church that gradually became Latin American from immigration. And I remember that we had done 2 concerts there already, and a group of like the older people in the church came up to me after one of the concerts and just mentioned, you know, we love choral music, and every year we create a little group from the church that goes to downtown St. Paul to listen to the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra sing Messiah, because we love Messiah, it's our Christmas tradition. And up until then, I'd never really thought about doing Messiah as part of a Latinx program. And then they mentioned, you know, Messiah's done everywhere so many times, and it's never been done here, even though this church has been here for almost 90 years. And that was the start of it. I mean, that was their idea, that they thought, wouldn't it be cool if someone did Messiah here? So I took a Messiah and translated half of it into Spanish. So it goes back and forth between Spanish and English. We interspersed it with music that was composed in Latin America at the same time as Messiah. So music for orchestra and choir in the same Baroque style by composers like Manuel de Sumaya, you know, like Padilla, composers by composers Tomás de Torrejón, composers that were Latin American working in the 1700s. And it went well. I mean, it is one of our more successful programs here in town. And I think it goes back to everything I touched on at the beginning. So it's about listening to your community and seeing what you can bring to it, and then at the same time creating links that get people to think about history, about society, about everything else that is part of the music, not just music for itself. For there's so much more to it. I think. I think that right now it's been living here in the Twin Cities during this present moment, and I think that this is happening everywhere. We're all feeling like this call to do something. Like there's this call to there's this brokenness, and we need to do something about it. And that call feels paralyzing. Like, well, I don't know what to do. And I really, really do think that at its core, it's going back to this idea of relationship, of what are my relationships to the people around me, and how am I honoring those relationships? Am I actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing to honor this relationship that I claim that I have? And I think that's a good starting point for anything, for any sort of community engagement, for any sort of programming, for what you do with your life,
Mm-hmm.
Ahmed, I was going to add, one person asked here, how does a course that's never done this before, how do you get started? And as you were talking, it reminded me 20 years ago, my chorus as an LGBT chorus started singing in schools, and it was really radical. And it was really hard to find a school that would even let us come in. But we had two music teachers that were singers in our chorus, and they were our lead into schools. And maybe that's where a chorus starts. Maybe you do a community meeting and you say, who's connected in the community? How can this relationship begin?
Mm-hmm.
There's an element of courage. I think, especially when you're trying to do something that maybe isn't as part of the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And I again, we're back to this present moment right now where we're feeling this call to action. The call to action isn't to join a book club. Joining a book club is the first step because you need to do the internal work. But the call to action is to action, to make structural change for something that you believe in. So I think that crucial step of getting your friends together to sing, or getting donations together to form an organization, or organizing an event somewhere, taking that action is just such a crucial step, and it's so hard to take, to actually go ahead and do it.
I think that was my little point about it. You may feel uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it is.
Yeah.
Especially because you're making yourself vulnerable and you're opening yourself to criticism. I mean, I remember the very first border crossing project we did. I was new in town. All my friends were white. I worked at the university. All my circles were white. So we did our first concert. It was all Latin American music, but all my singers were white. And I remember like putting myself out there and having friends come up and, well, yeah, but it's just a white chorus doing Latin American music. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, but you have to be open to the possibility that there will be criticism. It will make you uncomfortable, but then you keep doing the work to keep making it better.
Yeah.
It's better than no action.
Someone asked, do you think a children's choir could do this kind of work? Oh my gosh, absolutely. In fact, I think kids have so fewer inhibitions than adults that actually the relationship building could be so exciting.
And I would go as far as to say as that some of the most exciting work in this area is being done by children's chorus. If you look at something like Gondwana or something like that in Australia, like these are groups or that are or the Chicago Children's Chorus. These are, I think, the children's choirs, because of that lack of both innovation and context, and that's where most of the, I think, most exciting community engagement work is happening right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That is fantastic, both of you. And especially when you think about like children are the beginning, and the younger, just like singing, the younger they start to do something, like the more ingrained it is into their own personal life. And that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
We have a question. Do you have any recommendations for getting our white audiences to embrace more informal formats? You know, how do you properly communicate this expectation for a new experience, especially if that's not something you do already?
You, at least for my case, we do two things. We set an example. So, for example, a little thing like not having your choir standing in a closed room before the performance and then only coming out, but having them hang out in the space and talking with people before you start. The concert dress you use, the way you address the audience, all that contributes to this sense of formality versus informality. But also, sometimes you have to explicitly say it. So, for example, before a concert, you have to explicitly say, hey, there are people here with children, and we really love hearing the children making sound, so please don't shush them. You just have to say it sometimes.
That's
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yeah.
I think also getting out of concert venues and singing in a park or singing in a church fellowship hall rather than in the sanctuary, but creating those spaces that don't feel like a stuffy concert hall. Gymnasium, maybe.
Yeah, that is so great. So we're actually about time. So I really want to thank you both. Everybody, please join me in another virtual round of applause for Ahmed and Jane. Thank you so much for sharing these thought-provoking insights with us, and I hope we've all learned something today. Thank you to everyone for your great questions. We will see you tonight at the Family Sing and for the next session. Again, thank you both. Have a great day, everybody.